Great. So good evening, everyone. I'm Christy Evers. For those who don't know me, I'm the CSE chairperson, really for the secondary 8th grade and up. Dr. McCarthy is here. She is our Director of Special Education and Related Services. So we both welcome you this evening. I'd like to thank the Special Education PTA for really putting this evening together, and really Dawn for taking the lead and bringing everyone here and making sure that we had a great night planned for all of you, as I know that there are a lot of questions, and now is the time that you want to make sure that you understand the next steps in the process as you move forward as you're planning for post-secondary. I'd also like to welcome Rebecca Mullen. Rebecca is our department chairperson of our guidance department, who will also be speaking this evening to share some information on behalf of the guidance department and how they support families and students moving forward with the planning process. I would like Dawn, if you could want to introduce the rest of the panel, share names and titles, unless you'd like to introduce yourself.
Oh yeah, I forgot.
Would you rather that?
I'm sure.
Okay.
I'm Dawn Greenberg. I think you all know me, so whatever. So Alan Shepton is here of Shepton Tutoring Company Group. Has an office in New York, and of course here in Chappaqua. He does a lot of tutoring of regents and the SAT and ACT, and he does a lot of visits to colleges, and he's really, I find, very informative, especially about what our kids need. So we're excited to have him on the panel tonight. And during my 14 years as a special needs parent, the one thing I can always count on, I love the professionals, but it's the moms who know what's what. So I asked two amazing moms, Jamie Comstock, who was on the special ed committee back in the day, and her designated son is about to graduate from Sacred Heart in May. Yay! Yay, Henry! And a lot of you all know Linda Bosco from her Smile Around Town, and she does all the theater productions. She also has 3 girls. 2 are out in the world, and one in her freshman year has now gotten accommodations granted twice. And I always forget about Linda that she was a special ed teacher before she was a mom, so she knows what to do and how to do it, and they're both so calm and helpful always. So that's why we have moms on the panel tonight. So, Rebecca.
Okay. Hi everyone, my name is Rebecca Mullen, and I'm representing the counseling department tonight. I also want to welcome Ms. Comstock. Henry was my student, so it's incredible for me to think that he's getting ready to graduate. I'm starting to feel old. So I'm so happy to be here, and on behalf of my counseling colleagues, I think the message we really want you to take away from tonight is that we are here to help you every step of the way. And we really love our work. We love working with our students and their families, and we are in this together. What I'd like to do is kind of outline the timeline of our work together and talk about what we do from 9th grade to senior year. And then I'm happy at the end to answer any questions that you might have. So in the spring of 9th grade, you'll be receiving a letter from us. I actually have copies today that you can take home with you. And this letter outlines the process for requesting testing accommodations on the ACT and SAT. We send this home in the spring of 9th grade, hoping that you will read it very carefully, you will sign it, and you will send it back to us. And if you don't, we send it again in the spring of 10th grade, and that's why we start sending this home so early. And this process is actually, I think, a lot less scary than you may have heard, and it's a little more straightforward than you might believe. You're going to basically read this, you're going to sign the consent form that allows us to apply for the same accommodations that are on your child's IEP or 504 plan. And with the SAT, we'll go ahead and apply in 9th grade whenever we get this back, because once your child has the accommodations, they'll have them throughout high school. With the ACT, we're going to keep this consent form on file, and when you eventually register your child to take the ACT, that's when we're going to go ahead and apply for testing accommodations. And if you have any specific questions about that, I very much encourage you to reach out to your counselor who can help answer those questions. That's really the work of 9th grade as far as the college prep part goes. In 10th grade, we're actually starting this year, we're going to be introducing students to the career and college readiness software called Naviance Student. And eventually, that'll be the software that students use to do their college research. But in 10th grade, we don't allow them to see the college data yet for lots of important reasons. Instead, we really focus on the career readiness, and we're going to teach them to do a personality inventory, and we're going to do some career interest profilers with them, because we really want them to start thinking about life after high school, and that's sophomore year. In junior year, that's when we really start to do a lot of intensive work together around the college process. So in early November, we invite a dean of admission to come and speak to all the junior parents, and that's a really great evening. They talk about trends in college admissions, and they also walk us through kind of an overview of what they see year in, year out, and they give us lots of good advice for parents. Very shortly after that night meeting, we then start working with your sons and daughters in junior groups. Junior groups last approximately 6 weeks, and the sole purpose of the groups is to teach them about the college and post-secondary planning process. So we cover topics including teaching them how to use Naviance Student. We talk to them about how do I even begin to make a college list. We teach them the most important factors in college admissions. We talk to them about standardized testing and what tests to figure out is the best match for them and when to take it. We cover all of those very important topics, which then end, most importantly, in College Jeopardy in the last group, which the kids love. After junior groups, we ask students to complete something called the Junior Questionnaire, and it's a very intensive packet, and we ask them to reflect back on those 6 weeks, and we ask them questions like, is there a major that they think they might want to study in college? Do they want to go to a school that's half the size of Greeley or 50 times the size of Greeley? Are there parts of the country they want to go? We ask them so many questions, and we actually ask parents and guardians some questions as well. Once students complete that packet, they're going to hand it into the counseling department, and we're going to use that as well as their transcript and whatever testing we have up until that point, and we're going to plan for the hour-long family meeting. And that's really a very nice opportunity where we're going to have a very specific conversation with your counselor, the student, and the parents, and we talk about very specific schools and programs. We talk about teacher recommendations and who we think might be the best people to ask for your child. We talk about standardized testing and what tests need to still be taken. And we really work through any lingering questions you have about what levels of support might be appropriate. Some families come in and say, you know, we really think that we need a certain level of support at college. Could you help us find some colleges that match that level of support? And then other families come in and say, you know, we're not sure what level of support our child needs. Could you help us think through that? And we do. And that's really a nice opportunity to answer all of your very specific questions, right, with you and your children. And then the work for the rest of junior year becomes researching colleges, going out, visiting schools, finishing up testing, so that you're coming back in September with a nice list of schools that you and your counselors are really comfortable with. Starting in senior year, we then go into the nuts and bolts process, which starts with a night meeting, actually the very first week of senior year. And that's where we're going to outline very clearly, hopefully, the process for applying. How do the materials get to where they need to go? How do they get there on time? What part do we have to do? What part do you have to do? We outline all of that. We then started something 2 years ago that we love, and it's called the Drop-In College Application Clinic. So every day 6, all of the counselors are available, and we're sitting there with our laptops, and we're waiting for the seniors to come in, and we help them with actually applying to college. That has been so popular. It started, when we first started it 2 years ago, we'd have a few kids trickle in. Now we typically have between 25 and 40 kids coming in and saying, like literally pulling up their application and saying, could you just help me figure this part out? What about this part? And we love it. So we do that for the first 3 months of school. And we help students get all of their materials out the door. We also have something called Senior Fridays, where students can drop in and see their counselor, and they know that they have priority, the seniors. So whatever lingering questions they have, or if you encourage them to come see us to get their questions answered, you know that Fridays they have priority and they can walk in and see us whenever they need to. So that's kind of an outline of our work together. It's a lot of work together. We love what we do, and we're here to help you. And I hope that at the end of this night you leave feeling like, oh, okay, there's a time-tested process, it works, and the counseling department is here to help us every step of the way. And I will be back up to answer your questions. Thank you.
I want to remind you all again, there's a handout from Rebecca, and this is being videotaped, so if you didn't catch all that, you can get it again on the replay. So Alan Shepton's going to speak to us.
Okay. First of all, good evening. My name is Alan Shepton. My company, Shepton Tutoring Group, as Dawn said, I have an office up here in Chappaqua that's established in 2014. I have an office in New York City also. I've been doing test prep since 1991. I am also a professional member of the Independent Educational Consulting Association, which is the largest and most stringent college planning organization in the world. I have visited over 120 universities and colleges, both in the US and abroad. I just came back from a trip to the UK where I visited 12 universities all over London. Everything that Rebecca said about test planning is absolutely true, first of all. Second of all, starting early to get the accommodations in place for the SAT is crucial, okay? Especially with what has been going on the last couple of weeks with the scandals that we've all been hearing about. There have been a lot of questions that come into play about, does your child need the accommodations? If it's a valid reason, if it's shown at the building level at school, it is obviously warranted and demonstrated and needed. For the ACT, you apply for accommodations when you apply to take the test the first time. Most of the time, if the testing companies see that a child needs accommodations, they'll give the accommodations, so don't worry about that. So the things that I work with my families are creating a timeline for testing, also doing diagnostics. We usually encourage students to start doing diagnostics late sophomore year. It's like this, we could start doing a testing plan from the summer of 11th grade through the summer of 12th grade. So when we do testing, that's what we do. When we do college planning, we start the college planning process usually late sophomore year, early junior year. And we start talking about what sort of schools is your child looking for. So for instance, if a child says, I want to go to a big rah-rah school, we don't want parents crisscrossing the country. We'll say, well, why don't you look at University of Connecticut, see what that feels like. Does that make sense for your child? If your child has learning differences, we talk about that. If I and my team don't have the resources or the expertise, I have a network of probably about 20 to 30 college consultants and test prep professionals I can call on that I know that I could trust and work with. I think the most important thing is working with your guidance counselor, working with your director of guidance, staying focused and keeping perspective. There's a school for everybody, that's the bottom line, and the goal is you want your child to be happy and successful. Don't look for a brand name.
So we're going to start the panel. Again, if you can hold questions, that would be great, because we're going to try to do it in about 45 minutes so we can get out of here at 8:30 after we take questions. So I just have a couple of things I wanted to mention. Sorry, you can't see the black type. But I know a lot of you. I know a lot of your 10th grade parents and a few 9th graders. And this year, my son's team, I have a 10th grader, finally said to me, just stop. Take 10th grade off. Take a breath. I know, Alan, you're saying there's some things you definitely start, but if you have a kid who gets really worked up, it's okay. There's nothing you're missing out on in 10th grade, generally. Now you can do prep, etc. And then you can start visiting. I know some of you are already visiting. And you know, things really, of course, Rebecca gave a great outline of how things ramp up in 11th. You know, buckle your seatbelts. And I went to another seminar recently, and I know some of you have this concern, you keep hearing, my kid has to do activities, they have to cure cancer, and mind the whatever, and learn 10 languages. And I know for my son, he won't get out of the house. I know a lot of you have similar issues, and I stress, what in the world am I going to put on the application with activities? And the seminar I went to stressed, these are the top 4. This is what matters. And then secondarily, yes, extracurricular, letters of recommendation, etc. But Mr. Doherty put it very well to me. Find something he cares about, whatever it is, if it's whatever, working in a garage, whatever. Find something genuine, don't make it fit, and it's all going to work out. So that's my pearls of wisdom for what it's worth. Okay, but we're here to talk about college readiness, and we're going to talk mainly about the academic, the hard skills tonight. But I know some of us have had interest in doing side seminars on the softer stuff like dating, how do you get along in your dorm, how do you teach your kid how to grocery shop. So we're talking about doing some kind of weekend parenting kid seminars on that. So if you're interested, just find me. I have a great new neighbor. I'm going to hook her up with you all. She works at a private residential Asperger's school, and she does a lot of the soft skills training. So I'm going to ask her to do some maybe freebies for us. But anyway, college readiness. And this is for anyone on the panel, Jamie, Alan, and Linda. What types of academic skills are predictors of a student's success in college?
Let's start. I'm going to talk also, not only as someone who does this for a living, but also as a parent of a learning difference child. So my daughter was in early intervention when she was 6 months old. We started her, she was at our public school, starting when she was 3 years old, getting OT services. So she was through the special ed system in the Katona-Lewisboro schools. She was an A student in high school, graduated from college from Ithaca College, lives in LA, doing very nicely. I think one of the biggest skills that I think helped her is being a very good self-advocate. And not only doing the academic work, and also being right challenged. So what does that mean? It doesn't mean that we're going to make her take every AP course. It doesn't mean we're going to have her take all modified courses. We made sure that her academic load was appropriate. She herself was the type of kid who would track down teachers at lunchtime to go over things. She carried that skill through college. There was a very interesting article in the New York Times this week about snowplow parents, I think it was called. Okay, I have it. I can share it with you. But you don't want to create the road for the child. You want to show your child the road. That's the most important thing, because what I find is when kids don't know how to advocate, they don't know how to manage in college, they plan to fail. And I'm also going to talk, I teach on the college level also. I do have some students in my classes with learning differences, and I do find the ones that are most successful are the ones who know how to advocate and know how to manage their schedule. So work with your kids on that.
Now, what about independent living skills? I'll put that to Linda and Jamie.
Independent living skills are very important because they need all of a sudden to be the manager of their own time. And there's nobody there anymore to say, maybe the third serving of French fries could be avoided today. Or, the laundry issues, the things that I always took care of at home because I really wanted Henry to use his energy elsewhere, learning things that I felt were, more important during his high school years. Suddenly it was like, oh, he also needs to learn things like, when you leave the house, you always have to have your wallet and your key and your this and your that. You need to learn how to wash dishes that have more than 3 crumbs on them. You need to know how to do to remember to get your mail. And no one's going to bring it to you anymore. All those kind of little things that I didn't take into account. He handled pretty well on his own, but I think I should have thought about it more before he left. But mercifully, he was only an hour away, so most emergencies could be dealt with.
Okay.
I agree with all of the above, and including public transportation. We take that for granted here because everyone drives, but if you're at a big campus, even a small campus, there are some buildings that are off-site where you have to take a bus. You have to, and that's really an eye-opener. So that's a big one.
There are schools also out there that do have programs for freshmen that really help them manage. So Marist College has a fantastic program. Towson has a fantastic program. They are an additional fee, usually $10,000 to $12,000, and they're not included in financial aid. So they're separate from the full room and board. Another school that has one like that is McDaniel. So again, as you're doing your due diligence on schools and universities, work with your guidance counselor, work with your independent college consultant to find programs, see if that's what you need. Some kids do. We looked at them for my daughter. We felt that that was not really needed for her. Some kids do. Also, if you have a child who's on the spectrum, PACE is a really good program for kids who are either Asperger's or on the autistic scale, and has had considerable success for those students.
And I had asked Linda and Jamie, what would you have done differently, or what are 5 things you wish you had known? And so this kind of feeds into that, I think.
Well, some of the things that I wish I had known is, so I'll back up. My daughter, who is a freshman now at Manhattanville, but started in the fall at Hartford. She did really well academically at Hartford. As a matter of fact, she made the honor roll. And left Greeley with a 2.4 GPA. So we were very proud of her. But she was very homesick. So we thought just being a little over an hour and a half was close enough. And it was. I mean, we racked up a bunch of miles on our car, but it's really good to know your kid, and if there is a little bit of doubt, I don't know, I mean, we really pushed her to be away, and she just couldn't do it. So now she's at Manhattanville, and she does stay there, but she's home more than she's there, which is fine, because whatever is helping her get through the day and getting her happy, we're totally fine with that. And it is doable. During the Christmas break, we got her transferred there, and it all worked out. So that's one big thing, where you're going to send your child. If they want to go to California, that's a lot. Any kind of plane ride, you really have to know your child. So.
Yeah, I think Ms. Mullen had Henry, look at a map and sort of, I think most kids are told sort of circle around make a dot where you live, and then sort of circle the zone around which you want to stay within that zone close to home. And Henry instead put his dot on Yankee Stadium. Told me he was not going to Red Sox Nation no matter what. And I said, okay, well, be firm, because they keep telling you, they keep giving you schools up in the Northeast that he's like, I'm not going. I'm not going to live up there. I'm just not going to do it. So I thought, okay.
I'll take that again from, my daughter is very much what I call mommy do, okay? So basically she'll go to my wife and she'll say, what color earrings should I wear? What color nail polish should I wear? One of those kind of kids. And when we're looking at colleges, her 2 possibilities were New Paltz and Ithaca. And we would hear from her teachers at school how independent is she, what a great self-advocate she is, and she came home, she's a completely different kid. So when we're going through the process and we head down to those 2 schools, my wife and I really said we want her to go to Ithaca, and the reason was we didn't want her home every weekend. And we had the feeling that if we sent her to New Paltz, she was an hour from our home, we would get the call, Daddy, help me with this, Mommy, help me with this. We said if she's far enough away, she's going to rise to vacation, and she did.
Totally different kids. I think we kind of covered the self-advocacy piece. So we're going to talk about college choice. I know this is the $10 million question, and Alan has a lot of ideas. So again, we've covered a little bit of this already, but let's talk about the kind of accommodations that you might see in college, and those you might have to work a little harder would be granted. So do you want to talk about, I listed some of them here, but,
What will happen a lot of times is when you're working with your guidance counselor in the CSC and they're creating the 504 for your child, the 504 is a legal document. Okay, I as a college professor have to follow a 504. If a student gives me an IEP, I don't have to follow it. Okay, that's not a legal document. A 504 is, if I don't follow it, I can be sued by the family. Okay, so if there are accommodations you work that your child has had in school, continue with the accommodations. And sometimes your child says, I don't want those accommodations. Build them into place. They don't have to use them. They might decide 2 years hence, I don't want to take separate location. I don't need it. I don't need double time for testing. I don't want to get notes from a student. Have it all there. Let them decide what they want to use, what they don't want to use. The other thing that I will also talk about for those who don't know about FERPA, when your child reaches majority, basically all your job is to pay for college. You do not have access to their transcript. You do not have access to any information in school. So you want to have your child release FERPA rights so you can see that information. Because your child is hitting a brick wall and all of a sudden comes with 2.1 or probation, you want to say, well, what can I do to help you? So that's crucial.
so.
That is definitely crucial because I called several times in the beginning of the school year and they wouldn't even talk to me. They're like, she has to sign the form.
And I've had parents email me in college and say, how's my child doing? I say, you have to ask your child.
So Linda, you want to talk about how you were able to get accommodations at purchase or at Manhattan?
Sure. Can I talk about Hartford as well? Okay, so Emily started at Hartford and they were amazing. We had looked at several schools that were test optional because she did not do well on the testing. So, and there are tons of them, and every year there are more and more that are opening up to test optional schools. So that was kind of our choice, like these schools. When we looked at a school, my husband's an engineer, so he sees everything like engineers. So we looked at a school the way it was laid out, and a lot of the schools are set up where this is where they live, and a mile away is where the tutoring center is. And we thought in our head, like, she will never get up in the middle of winter and walk a mile to get tutoring, so scratch that school off. But there are several schools where everything is right where it should be in walking distance and it's set up beautifully. Hartford and Manhattanville are like that. Hartford's about twice the size as Manhattanville, but everything is on one side. And the way that they set up the accommodations was you sent everything in, all your testing, all your IEPs, everything. They look at it, they determine if your child should get the testing. Now this is after you're accepted into the school. So you have to remember that as well, because you can get accepted into the school and then they can say, no, you're not going to get it. But that rarely happens. So then they meet with you and then they meet with your child. And they basically ask your child to fill out a form. What do you think you should get and why? And then they meet with the parent and they ask the same. And then they come up with about 20 more accommodations that we've forgot. And like Alan said, you just take on all the accommodations that you can, fill the plate, and you don't have to use them. But it's harder to ask for them mid-year. So with both schools, she got pretty much everything she got here at Greeley. The only thing is like everybody's going to hammer into your head, is self-advocacy. They're adults now, they have to ask for everything. They have to go to the testing center and set up the time. They have to, make sure everything is, in order. They have to do it all, but it's there for them. The way note-taking is, which I love, is it's about 2 weeks into the semester. somebody in the class decides that they'll take notes, then they upload them into an anonymous file. And then your child gets like a PIN number and then goes in and then can download the notes every single day for every class. So that's great. Except last semester there was one little problem. So I mean, every accommodation is great, but there's always a little bump. There was one class where she didn't understand the girl's handwriting. So, there's always a little bump. But she really is thriving at Manhattanville. Manhattanville, you have to pay if you want to get extra services. But if you don't want to pay, they have all the accommodations are there. You don't have to pay for that, obviously. But if you want extra tutoring, you have to pay for that. And I have the information in some of these folders here if you want to look at them later. So that's it.
One thing that we did when my daughter was starting, she went to Ithaca, knowing that she was taking some quantitative courses, and courses that looked more like a 12th grade high school course, we actually put in place, in case she needed them, teachers from the local high school that she can call to get private tutoring. That we said, okay, she's taking a higher level math course, she's not going to be able to call me, let her have someone who could work with her that's not going to be very expensive if she should need a little bit of extra help. Because sometimes the professors are not as accessible. Or if your child has a professor where your child says, I don't understand what this person's talking about. Or as a tutor, a lot of times they're college students who've taken the course and succeeded. Just because they're a good math student or good accounting student or whatever have you, doesn't mean they're a good tutor. So that's another way to get someone in place that can help your child once they're in school.
And Jamie, Henry started with accommodations and then was able to back off, right?
That's sort of his trajectory all the way through. Henry started when he came to West Orchard as a 3rd grader. He had a one-on-one aide, and that was successful, but sort of more than he needed. By the time he went to Seven Bridges, he had an aide that he shared with another student, and when he came to Greeley, it's a different model here, and he had the study centers, and that was required of him, and that actually worked really well. I think he appreciated the not having sort of what I think he felt was the stigma of a human shadow, saying, Henry, are you paying attention? And he had accommodations. He certainly had extra time on tests. He had that when he took the ACTs. He could take tests alone in a quiet room instead of among other students where small sounds are very distracting to him sometimes. And he had those accommodations which he got when he arrived at Sacred Heart. I brought the form you fill out for them, plus they ask for all the other, the testing and the letters from the guidance counselor, as well as transcripts and all of that stuff. But this is their basic 4-page form at Sacred Heart that you fill out when your student arrives. And I just brought it in case anybody wanted to see it. But yeah, he's pretty much let all of his accommodations go as far as I know. I think his classes, once he was done with some of the freshman core courses, which had really large numbers, once he was in the smaller electives, I don't think the issue of being alone for testing was such an issue anymore. But he did sign also a release himself that all of his professors would know that he was on the autism spectrum and had ADD, and not just the form that said that I could see his records. He had to sign other things. And I just did want to agree completely that you don't realize that when you go from here where you have lots of people to talk to who can speak to you directly about your student's experience, you go to college and absolutely no one can speak to you. I mean, I went through like to the dean. At one point I was like, I just want to hear that he's doing okay. You don't even need to give me specifics. It's like, you know, radio silence freshman year. And I, you know, is he making C's? Is he, you know, whatever? And they were like, can't really, you know, we can't really share that much with you. And then it turned out he was doing great. But, you know, when you don't have any information, of course, the mind wanders. But he was very prepared, and I think he's more than made up for his academic issues, and he will graduate in May with a regular degree in communications, and was already offered a job which he turned down. So I think I should finish college. Thanks. But it's very scary when they're in high school. And I can remember being when Henry was here in 10th grade, and I was paying a tremendous amount of money for private tutors just to get him through sophomore year, never mind, you know, junior year. And I was just terrified. I really didn't have any idea whether he'd be accepted by any college. I just had nothing to base it on. He's my eldest child, and even though we have a great special ed community in our school district, I just, you know, everybody's kid is different, but he got into 7 out of 9 schools that he applied to. He wrote his college essay about working with the Greeley varsity baseball team and how much it meant to him to have Coach Marino have him do all the stats on the iPad at every game, and how the team embraced him, and how the baseball field was one of his favorite places in the world. He still comes to Greeley games as soon as he's home from college. It's very sweet. And Coach Marino wrote a letter, I think, that explained that it took them 2 years to figure out that Henry was keeping stats not only on the Greeley kids, but on every other kid on the teams that Greeley played. So they knew who was going to hit to the left field. And Henry said, well, why aren't you, you know, don't, no, go, get back, you know. This kid hits, you know, always that way. And finally, you know, Coach Marino said, are you keeping stats on the kids at Fox Lane? And he was like, of course. So he was, I had nothing to worry about, and I wasted a lot of panic and tears, And I had, I'm divorced, and it was not a pretty time in dealing with my ex-husband, but Henry, you know, he just has done better than I ever could have imagined, and we're really grateful and really proud.
Can I just add to that? Emily too is thriving. She had an IEP since 2nd grade, and I just wanted to piggyback on what you had said, that leaving Greeley, she was so very prepared. She really, really was. One of her teachers last semester said, like, wow, you're like the best, like, you're such a great writer, and the way you outline and underline and make notes on the side, and it made her so proud. But she really was very, very prepared leaving here. But we were very nervous too, like you, and most of you here probably, the uncertainty, thinking, oh gosh, are they going to get in? Are they going to get rejected? But she was able to pull through and get accepted as well to a bunch of schools. And she had some rejection, which is fine. I think that's a good thing. But yeah, she was very, very prepared after leaving Greeley. So that was really, I just want to hammer that home.
Okay, so Alan has a great handout on college visits that's in your folder, but do you just want to speak about it a little bit? You already touched on it, all of you, but how do you do the visit between 10th and 11th? Are you just really scouting for size and urban and
Okay.
suburban?
Well, haven't you gone to visit colleges and universities already? Okay, so a number of you have seen it already. And basically what happens is, and I see these all the time, I call it the dog and pony show. They start with someone in the admissions office showing a slideshow of very happy kids, eating and playing the Frisbee and all that stuff. Then you go on a tour. Okay, and it almost feels like an infomercial for the school. So one of the things that I always ask, the first thing is, well, one thing you should definitely ask is, how do you dissect a transcript? Because Greeley's grading system is very different from John Jay's. John Jay's weighting is different from Greeley's, which is different from Fox Lane's. And how do they take all these schools, and then schools internationally, and private schools, how do they kind of put everyone on the same playing field? Or do they, or can they? The other thing that we did is we always visited the Disability Supports Department just to see what's available. And we were able to ascertain what schools made sense and didn't make sense. Some schools had just private, extra tutoring. And well, who does the tutoring? Oh, it's a college student, a junior who took the course. That's not the right fit for my daughter, okay? Some schools had amazing programs. Towson, we were really impressed with. What? Towson in Maryland. We were really impressed with that. Marist has an amazing program. I was just at McDaniel College in Maryland, has a very good LD support program. Curry has a good program. So what you need to do is really work with either your independent consultant or with your guidance counselor to find those schools and say, what are the schools that really make sense for a kid who has learning differences? It's real important.
And do you love this guidebook?
Yes, that's on my shelf. There are two books that I have on my shelf that the KW Guide for Learning Disabilities. There's another book called Colleges That Change Lives. That should be on every bookshelf too. There's schools that you will not have heard of, that I've never heard of either, that sometimes come up as gems. McDaniel College was one of them that was on there. Juniata College. I went to visit Ursinus about 3 years ago and was completely bowled over. Another school that's on it is Rhodes College in Memphis, which probably very few people have heard of, has one of the highest acceptances to medical school of all colleges, including the Ivies in the United States. Okay, they have internships with St. Jude, so work very closely with them. So again, you think outside the box, you work with your guidance counselor on this. They'll help you. They'll help you find those gems that will work best for your child.
And closer to us, we also have Iona College, which has an outstanding program called the College Assistance Program.
The CAP. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So Henry got into Iona, and then once he was in, then you had to apply to the program once you've been accepted into the general freshman population. So he got into both, but something clicked and he really loved Sacred Heart, and I couldn't talk him into going anywhere else. But also, I think Adelphi.
Yes, Adelphi is a really
great
good
program.
Yes.
Manhattanville has
Yes.
had for years.
University of Hartford.
If you have the kind of kid who wants to be close to Yankee Stadium.
One of the things you should look at also is the retention, the graduation retention rate, which is really important because some schools on paper say that, they're amazing. And then when you look at the retention rate, it's like 22%. You're like, something's not right there. But that's important, right? Do you agree?
Well, yes. Well, the thing that I always ask also is, what's your freshman retention rate? And if a school says below 85%, that's a problem. Okay? It's not only a problem for the school, it's also a problem for finances of the school, because that retention rate is important when schools want to build new buildings or or want to do capital improvements. So if it's below 85, it is an issue. And sometimes schools will gloss over, well, kids couldn't afford it, whatever. There are things in place. Another thing to understand, when your child is getting accommodations, it doesn't mean that their workload is being modified. So I teach Calculus 1 at Iona, and I have students who have IEPs, have 504s rather. I can give them extended time, I can give them an extra day to do a project, but I can't water down my course. So therein lies a very big challenge, and that's something that also as parents you really need to understand. It means that the school will work with your child. It doesn't mean that they're going to make the course easier for your child.
That's a great point, because a lot of the work here is modified, and then when you go to college, it's not. But like test accommodations, if you have extra time on testing, say you get 100%, and the test is 2 hours, you get 4 hours, but then what happens if you have a class right after that? They work that all out for you, and you can take the test, like they'll draw a line or take it away, and then you can take it the next day. They work with you, so it's not impossible.
Okay, and this is a big controversy. I've heard, I think Linda, you said, you just took your IEP to both places, Hartford and Manhattanville, and they honored that for accommodations. And then you hear that some schools require you to have a whole new evaluation done. So what's the truth of that?
Well, we were within the 3-year umbrella of testing. So they didn't require her to take another round of testing, but they just took our IEP and all the testing that they did here, plus her transcript.
I think Henry's had expired, and he did a lot of testing the summer before his freshman year at Sacred Heart to just nail down that he was still total, and he did it with the same person that he'd done it with 3-4 years before. So, but he went back and he, much to his annoyance, had to do it all again. But I wanted it, completely up to code for the colleges, because I felt it was going to be a significant issue if he wasn't granted accommodations. But it all worked out in the end. And I just want to say also that I think your observation is 100% right, that there's a lid for every pot. There's definitely a school out there for everyone. And if you'd asked me 6 years ago, would Henry go to Sacred Heart, I would have been like, no, we're not Catholic. I mean, I was so ignorant about what was available, and so surprised by what I saw. And Henry was also very reluctant to visit schools, so we didn't visit many schools. I think he'd only seen one before his senior fall, and then all of them were bunched into, senior fall. Luckily, they weren't very far away, but that was harder. And I just thought of something else that was, never mind.
I wanted to add one more thing that I just remembered. If you are asking for financial aid, or if you have a scholarship, there are a lot of schools that give them safety nets, whereas most schools will say you have to have 12 credits to be full-time. And say your child gets a scholarship, and then they have to withdraw from a class because they're not doing well. A lot of the kids with IEPs will get that safety net of 9 credits, but that you have to ask each individual college. But that's important, because if you're, if you're looking for financial aid, or if you get a nice scholarship, you don't want to lose that.
Another thing also, test optional. When schools say they're test optional, you want to find out what are the ramifications. Some schools require a graded paper. Some schools will say, well, for instance, Muhlenberg says, if you go test optional, you're not eligible for any of our merit-based scholarships. So again, you want to find out, because I always say there's no such thing as a free lunch. Find out what they need in lieu of that test, because there might be something else.
So here's a list of some of the test optional, but there are, 300? However many tests?
Fairtest.org is a website to look at, and they have every school and every day changes. University of Chicago just went test optional, actually.
So they're looking only at your grades, at your essay, and then that's it. Kind of. I mean, that's a lot of stock to put in your grades and your essay.
But when we visit, like, I was just at Gettysburg in the fall, and I asked the director of admissions, well, what does that mean? And she said about 75% of students are still sending testing in. So So kids are still sending those numbers and they are looking at what they're saying is, if we see the numbers don't make sense for our school, it could hurt your child. So tread lightly.
Okay. So, last big thing, college admissions, the big thing. We did a separate session with Laura Wilson in the fall about choosing SAT versus ACT, and that tape is up on the special ed website, I think. I mean, we'll get into it with Alan because he's the expert on this too. So let's just dive into college admissions. How do students get, Rebecca told us, but just in case you missed it, you go to guidance for the SAT, which covers you for the rest of your high school years, right? Is that good for the PSAT, or are there any accommodations on the PSAT? And the ACT, you have to do the one form, and then you have to ask again every time you take the ACT. Right? Do you want to speak generally about SAT versus ACT for our kids?
Okay. When the SAT was redesigned in 2015, and a lot of my students came to my office saying, oh, they're just exactly the same now, and it's not the case at all. The SAT, I consider more of an exam of take something apart and build it back together again. It's really a heavy-duty reasoning test. If you look at the design of the mathematics on the SAT, it looks very much like the Common Core Algebra 1 Regents, and the reason is David Coleman, who's the president of the College Board, also was the architect of the Common Core in the United States. So you see a lot of similarities, and I show that to my students all the time. In terms of mathematics, it's less comprehensive. So it tends to heavily emphasize Algebra 1 skills, a little bit of Algebra 2 skills, and heavily de-emphasizes geometry. The ACT exam is a tour of mathematics from pre-algebra through advanced Algebra 2. It's a very fast-paced exam. So on the ACT math, for instance, a student has an average of 1 minute per question, whereas the SAT is about 1 minute 20 seconds per question. So if your child is a slow processor, the ACT might not be a good test for your child. If your child is a very literal or a very concrete thinker, the ACT might be a good test for your child. The other thing also with the SAT, the reading I find to be much more sophisticated than the ACT. I also find the passages more interesting. They do ask a lot of passages with graphics. Understand this graph. What does it mean? What does it entail? The ACT has a scientific reasoning passage. So if your child's a STEM kid, that might be a better test. What I tell every parent to do is try each exam. We do diagnostics on every student. We have them try both exams. Which one works best? We have the kids debrief with us. What did you like better? Why? And that's how we create a testing plan. I don't believe in a student trying to prepare for both and just take them both, because this is a lot of work, and we want them to do it. We want them to go down one path, do it the best of their ability. They shouldn't be spending their life doing test prep. This is one small facet of their application. What I always say to parents is, I'd rather see a kid who has great academics and an okay ACT than having these amazing SAT or ACT scores and having a so-so transcript. So if I look at financial, I say, your transcript looks like an income statement. It's what happens over 3 years of life. Whereas an ACT is like a balance sheet. It's what happens on one day, one particular time for 3 hours.
Right, so go back to this a little bit. Again, it's about the GPA, it's about the rigor, our QPR. Do they take APs? Do they, how are their grades on those classes?
Another thing I want to talk about for some of you is, because I hear this all the time with parents, they come to my office and they'll say, we're dropping my child down from enriched to standard. Well, how's your child doing enriched? Oh, she's doing B plus A minus, but we want to make sure our child gets the A. It's the worst decision you could ever make for your child. So if your child is doing well in a course or in a track, leave well enough alone. Don't start playing games, because the schools also shake their head and say, this kid was in enriched geometry, ran a B+. Why did they drop down to Algebra 2 standard all of a sudden? What happened? Or if they're doing great in, let's say, French through 11th grade, running straight A's, they drop French in 12th grade. Why did that happen? So, believe it or not, schools do rip apart transcripts and kind of ask these questions. And if there aren't good cogent reasons behind it, that could hurt.
And then back, I think we covered optional schools. You don't disclose the disability on your college application. What do you think about writing your essay about your disability?
Separate essay.
Don't do it, okay.
You don't need to write, you can put an extra statement in, that's perfectly fine, but you don't make it the topic of your, your Common App statement.
Why?
That's really for, the goal of a good Common Application essay is for the school to get that third dimension. It's almost like your child is in the room. So a good essay could be anything from, I had one student who wrote a great essay about, he took the reader through a scuba dive. Okay, it was just a very simple, great essay. I learned a lot. I had a student who wrote about her parents were both working on Christmas. She made her Christmas dinner for a family of 15. Told the whole story about that. My daughter wrote hers. We'd gone to Germany as a family about the expression Arbeit macht frei, what it was supposed to mean and what it did mean. So it could be something that really makes your child, a little unique, gives them their own perspective, and that's what that really does. They're not expecting your child to be Malala, okay? It's really to add that fourth dimension to your child.
Okay. Ladies, anything on the essay?
I was happy that Henry wrote about the baseball field. I just,
Great essay.
one of his things that he loved about it there was that the coach said the kids weren't allowed to talk about academics while they were playing baseball. So it was great because it meant all these Greeley students couldn't talk about academics and had to talk about sports with him. So no wonder it was his happy place.
And it was fun.
And it was different, and it was unusual to have a kid say, my favorite place is on my school campus. That I was surprised that was what he wanted to write about, but very happy with what he did.
And my daughter actually did write about her disability, and it was a great essay. So everyone is different.
Right. There's other things you can't or you don't, but if you want to, whatever works for your child, whatever your child wants to present to the school. I always tell, I'm sure you say the same thing, you never talk about that game we won or the dead grandparent or grandfather, because I learn more about the grandparent than the child. If it's more how it affects your life or how you interact, it's a different story. But you want to make sure it's your child's voice coming in. And don't write the essay for your child either.
Now, who would do that? So there are umpteen resources out there. I'm just listing a few of them here. There's the college fair at Fox Lane next month. What is that about, Rebecca? It sounds like a free-for-all. A lot of high school students go to Fox Lane during the day. You all probably got that in the mail. I just received it in the mail. They were smart not to send it home. We had to sign permission to let them go to Fox Lane on May 1st. So what is that like?
Yeah, so most of our kids don't go during the day because they don't like to go to school. They opt for the night. And basically it's a fair. So there's tables, hundreds, set up with different colleges, and you go and you get brochures and you sign up for more info sessions. I think the most valuable thing that I would suggest or could take advantage of, in the fall, we have over 200 colleges now that will come visit Greeley students and meet with them here. Those meetings are really important for juniors and seniors to get to. The people who come are often the people who are making the decisions. They know our students, they know our curriculum, and I think it's just a really good opportunity for students to hear directly from the horse's mouth what's available at the schools. I think that this college fair can be a little bit overwhelming. It's hundreds and hundreds of colleges and booths. And so I think if you're interested in running around getting pamphlets, I think it's great. If that might seem overwhelming, you don't have to go. You're not missing out. If that makes sense.
Thank God. Okay.
And one thing just to add to what Rebecca said, is if your child has an interest in the school, they should definitely go to the school visits when they come to the school. Some schools do track interests, not all of them, but again, let your child be known to that admission officer and have him or her introduce themselves. I mean, there's no reason not to.
And also, doesn't Greeley do a night where former students come back? That's really a great night. I think that's a good thing to do too. And then also when you're visiting a school, go in all the seasons. Don't go on a gorgeous day.
The football game. Whatever.
Serious.
So there's a symposium in the city on, I can't read my brochure, in April. Karen Basic and I are going, I think.
I think so. I've got it signed up.
All right. So I'm going to it. There are a lot of great colleges there, especially for kids with learning disabilities. So I'm going to try to bring back as much as I can from that. You know, we're lucky to be near the city. There's so many programs. I'm going to put Karen on the spot. Her son is doing New Frontiers in Learning, which sounds like a great
All right, I'm talking.
program.
Well, I guess I can, right? I was worried about these PTA dudes. Yes, I was turned on to that through my therapist, and last summer my son, we did a two-week program where they taught him about using the subway through apps. And first they're going with them to, you know, which I laughed because some of my elderly friends were like, I need that. You know, and they teach you how to use the apps and get yourself around. Each child chooses a place they want to go in the 5 boroughs, and then they learn how to go around on mass transit by themselves. And they told me that which I thought was hilarious, they said that they pulled themselves out as the guide to see the kids do it by themselves. But she said, but don't worry, it's like we hide behind a pylon. And so I would feel like jump out and if there's a problem. But he became extremely confident. I would send him off on Metro North. He'd go into the city by himself. They would meet him at Grand Central, and then they would go off, and then they would come back. And at the end, he's completely comfortable. He went several times by himself on the subway. He got a Metro card. He got himself around where he wanted to go. He came back. He was too tired to take the subway, so he insisted on taking a Lyft one day. So it was a real independence. And then I have, since then, Cindy's here. Cindy Katz here is working at Westchester Community College in the student
Disability Services Office.
which was awesome for me because my son is taking a class there. He's on a slower path than applying and jumping in. So he's dribbling, which I knew when I met Mrs. Weber years ago would be our pathway. So he's taking a course, but he has accommodations through the Student Center. And you had lots of ideas about, he tests there, but he has to, go there, hand in a sheet, give it to the professor back, these kinds of things. I think.
Sign up for testing.
Right.
Right. And one of the things I just wanted to add to that about accommodations is that even though the accommodations are approved, it's really important, and whatever school you wind up with, that I'm sure that Disability Service Office will tell you this, is that each semester your child needs to register with the office. And each college will do that differently. I know at Ithaca, so my daughter goes there also, they do intake, almost like they meet with the counselor. At WCC, it's really just a form that you fill out. And it's automatic, but you have to do that because that's the way that they inform the professors that your child or the student has accommodations. Because no college is going to just send off to your students' professors that next semester. So that's really, really important. It doesn't just end with the documentation. They have to register every single semester if they want their accommodation.
Right, and also building on what Alan said about being an advocate, that's one thing I think the school did a really good job with my son about being an advocate for himself, because the first day that I dropped him off, because he was able to take at Westchester Community College while he was a high school student, a college course, which was the best thing we ever did, because he was still in high school, he was only half-time, and he went in the afternoon twice a week to the college, and he took a course. And the first day we went, he was so nervous. But then, and I dropped him off and felt 5,000 years old, all these college students. And he, at the end, he came out and I said, how did it go? And he said, I talked to the professor after class. I told him I'm a person with Asperger's. I told him the things that I had difficulty with. And the professor shared with me that he had ADD and that he understood accommodations and said that he was working with me. And through the whole semester, he emailed back and forth between the professor and helped him. Even when he was so nervous and he said, I want to audit the course, he freaked out because he has a lot of anxiety. the professor tried to convince him not to, and was so complimentary and so helpful, and really built up his self-esteem. And then this term he decided to take another course because we were doing it very slowly. I may be in a walker by the time he graduates, but he now has said to me he's thinking about going, he wants to think about maybe going away. So for him, the pathway, the slow pathway was a good pathway, and all the positive. And we got our activities. I'll shout out to Dawn because he's interested in politics, and she helped us to get on the campaign. So I feel like even though we didn't have activities in high school that much, he has them now, and he has a focus, and he's excited about learning, and it's working out really well. But it wasn't the traditional path, so there are different ways to get at it, and don't feel like if you go and it's like not working out. I know I talked to somebody, everybody tells about Landmark, and some people go to Landmark in Vermont, and it's a really good experience. And then I talked to somebody where it just totally blew up, and they ended up home again. But then their kid was going to community college, so there's other ways to do it. And for us, it's because there's a lot of anxiety. Well, there's other issues. Medical issues, I know, didn't even come up. That's an issue for us. How to manage a medical condition on the campus is a big challenge for us. So everybody has their own story, but you can make it work and find a way.
If it's medical issues, what you want to do is visit a local hospital or ask even your physician for recommendations. I have a student I'm working with this year who has some very, very specific issues, and I'm working with the parent to help her find, and the physician to find an endocrinologist in the town, in the city where her child will be matriculated. And a student that I work with who was diagnosed with depression freshman year and had to drop out of school. And everything worked out. The student transfers in another school, and he's being medically managed at a top university. But again, it's making, that's another part of the puzzle. If you do have a medical condition, whether it's chronic or whether it's diabetes or whatever have you, you want to make sure that you have someone in that town that you could trust in case, heaven forbid, something happened.
And can I also add, I know we're not supposed to talk about social, but I know in doing, like for my son is type 1 diabetes, and I brought this up with the endocrinologist, and we did two things. One, she had a pamphlet about managing things like drinking on campus, which for him as a diabetic would be a disaster, but they talk about it in this whole thing. And also, I started making him make his own medical appointments and putting it in his phone, and because this is one of the things I read, because if you're going to be fully responsible for whatever your issue is, and he's even making dental appointments now, because it's learning how to be, and also money, that I don't know if that came up either.
Yeah, I was going to add that to your dental, to your medical appointments, that I was happy that I had Henry working with a debit card.
Yes.
Before he headed off to school, and I made sure that I opened an account in a bank that he could easily access that bank. It turns out Bank of America is like everywhere. But I find out from that campus what the best bank is, and open an account together so you can see what they're doing. He learns the Uber and Lyft from his friends at school, but that's a great thing for them to have. And the other thing was to be better about getting rid of emails. He just lets emails pile up forever, and he never deletes anything. So we had to go through being more proactive about sorting that and maintaining your media in flow.
And just like with course selection and things like this, I was just talking to my friend whose son just got accepted. Yay! And I was saying, think about your student as a learner. What is the time when you're picking courses, when you're sitting with your college counselor? Like I was saying, the college counselor, I've been in it, so that's why I feel like I'm learning. And she's like, well, what time of day? And for him, the afternoon was better. And so choosing courses, and then, well, there's a 3-hour option or there's an hour option two or three times a week. Well, the hour option is better for me. I have trouble focusing and staying in attention. If there's options that would be better for them, knowing what those options are, and the counselors are really good about. Also, I think they know the professors who are good, because I feel like, they know who to help you find the like I heard from your office, like, oh, that guy's not so great about emails, so it can be very helpful to know. They should know themselves as a learner, like what works best for me as a learner when I'm going to college. Like, am I better in a short, or am I better with a long? I mean, when there's an option, do a long lecture or a shorter lecture work better? Early in the day, late in the day. I find knowing those things about yourself when you sign up for courses, you're more successful is helpful.
Well, one thing we found at Ithaca, when my daughter was signing up for courses, let's say she had to take economics one semester, and the people in Learning Center said to her, take this professor.
Yes.
This one tends to be a lot more sympathetic, or will work more with a kid who's learning difference, as opposed to Professor C, D, and E.
Right.
So that was really helpful. So using that center, they know the score with a lot of courses, so that's crucial.
I just want to speak real quick. Okay, sorry.
Oh, no, I just want to add on to this because it came up about trying to, however you want to say it, wean off of your accommodations or something, is that I just want to add in from the experience, and I haven't been there that long at that office, but there are definitely had phone calls from parents of students that went away to school that I guess they felt that maybe now was the time to cut the strings or something, and that they wouldn't need their accommodations anymore, and after the semester they wound up coming home. And so they were starting over again. And I've also had students come in mid-semester or the second semester oh, I didn't think I would need it, or I don't want to use it anymore. And it's well, now I think I have to because I really need extra time. So I really think that, you should just apply for it. Just get them there, and if they decide not to use them, or they only want to use it for one class because that one particular class, they need the extra time, then they should just do it.
Listen, the bottom line is that the colleges want your kids to succeed.
Yes.
Yes. There are some schools I know at Hartford anyway, they let you have priority registration because they know that you need specific classes for specific times. They're there to help you. They're very, very good at their accommodations. They want your kid to succeed.
Last year we did this event and everyone was talking gap years. That didn't come up tonight, but we have a lot of gap year information. Connie Whitehouse did a really great gap year fair. So if you need info on that, or their website is up here, because talking about non-traditional routes, someone said to me, why do you have to do it in 4 years? Do it in 6 years. Let the kid take 10 credits the first semester. Or, there's so many options these days. And just to think about Landmark. Landmark has a great program. Once they're admitted, you can go in July and August, and they kind of just do a dress rehearsal for your kid, what it's going to be like.
And other colleges are doing this now.
Mhm.
My friend at SUNY Purchase is doing it.
Oh, yeah?
And Mitchell College does that as well.
So let's open up to questions. We've got about 12 minutes, give or take. So,
Talking about reducing course load, does that mean you're signing up for 6 years of tuition versus 4 years of tuition? Are there other routes to accomplish that?
You might be. Or you can possibly do some coursework over the summer. You have taken WCC or online. Some schools do have online options over the summer. But if you're required to take 120 credits in order to graduate, you're taking 10 credits or per semester instead of 15, it's going to take you 12 semesters, 6 years.
And if you are applying for a scholarship or financial aid, most of them will say 4 years.
so 6 years is only for the well-to-do. Okay.
So in college applications, how important are teacher recommendations? Everything else seems to be important, but that's the part I
It
worry
paints a
about.
picture. I think what it does, I'll tell you some interesting stories that I've heard from directors of admission that sometimes, first of all, I always tell students to ask the teacher, can you write me a strong recommendation? I always tell the student, don't just hand the teacher the recommendation, you go for it, sit and have a conversation with him or her and talk about why you like that class, why you like that course of study, whatever have you. I was with a director, I think it was, I forgot which school anyway, and this was what the recommendation said: call me. Okay? Why I say call me? The teacher, the recommender said, this is a really bright kid who is so full of himself and so arrogant that you don't want this kid at your school, which was very interesting. I think the thing is you want people who know your child, who will write a strong recommendation. Your guidance counselor is going to write about your child. I don't know if you do at your school. Our high school did something called ID Me, where the parents had to write like a story about the child, and they use that as a basis of part of the recommendation. But they can be important.
Yeah, I have a question for Rebecca. Sure. I heard this from a friend that her son, they were nervous about the interview, and she said that the guidance counselor worked with her son to practice for the interview one-on-one rather than in a large group. So
Yeah.
that's still the case?
Absolutely, we're always going to do that. Some students will come in and ask, and typically what we do is like if it's my student, we'll practice, but then they'll go and do their little, like real practice interview with another counselor. Because I don't want them to be so comfortable because it's me, right, with my student. So absolutely. If you want that or the student wants that, we offer, but parents are always welcome to email us and say, could you pull them in and do a little practice interview? Sure. And just about teacher recommendations, if I could just add to that. Teacher recommendations are important because these are academic institutions, right, that students are applying to. And so colleges are very interested in what is a student adding to an academic environment in their high school. Really, that's the core question. And what a teacher is able to say is, this student left a better writer than they came in as. If a teacher can talk about growth over time, that is such a powerful statement. And so it doesn't always have to be the teacher who's teaching the class that the student is doing the best in. Sometimes the most powerful recommendation can be, this doesn't come easily to the student. However, they work harder, stay longer, and do better than many of the students in their class. They understand the more difficult concepts quickly, and they're able to help the student to their right and left catch up. Sometimes that's a more powerful letter than they do really well, it seems to come natural. Thank you. So, but again, that's something that we will help you talk through when we have the college meeting in junior year.
Also with interviews, I used to do interviewing for my alma mater, and I used to run the secondary school network. So I used to train my interviewers. There are two types of interviews. There's evaluative and informative. So an informative interview is just you're meeting with an alum of the school and you're having coffee and talking. They're writing a recommendation. It's not going to be a detractor, or it might be a little bit of an adder. It's not going to be a detractor. An evaluative interview is one where it does count as part of the admission process. And the thing that you want to be able to do is know the school, to know what it offers and why you want that school. So that's crucial in those interviews, to be able to ask good questions.
I have another question for Rebecca. Guidance, and we're in the mock. I've got twins who are juniors now. One who has some learning disabilities. Do you keep track in guidance of some of the schools say that a kid with ADHD has traditionally done better at, like not specifically like a program for ADHD, but schools maybe that are, I don't know, more kind to dealing with a kid with a disability, or a school that may not focus as much on a standardized test, but more so on the grades, or, the junior meeting I just found very rote, and going with twins is sort of like, here's your list based upon, I don't know, next to nothing. It wasn't all that helpful. So I think like people contract, private people on the side to get like a little more info, but just really have some of that data.
Yeah, I'm sorry, that was your experience. So what I would say is those meetings are actually prepared on a lot of information that your student, your child filled out, that you filled out as well, right? So what I would say is if you have questions, please feel comfortable calling your counselor and making a follow-up meeting or sending your child in to get more information. Yes, we have all of that information. We have over 100 years of combined
Does
college.
somebody like track it somewhere, like even
Yeah.
like with Naviance, it doesn't show you like the kids that dropped out of that school, or like the rigor that a kid took, or like.
Right, and so we wouldn't have, you know, that information once students leave
But as a
here.
collective body, like as if you hire a private board, just really keep track of, you know, say some of the big rah-rah schools that require test scores, but really we know they'll look at the grade more so if you know, say you have ADHD versus, you know, another school that you know, like test grades are so important. You know, like don't bother with your time in that school, but this school may be a little more lenient once they learn about you and your disabilities.
So if I'm understanding the question, it's, do we have information about what colleges look at in terms of admissions factors and criteria? And the answer is yes. And we have that information in several different ways and places, right? So what I would say is it sounds like there's some specific questions that you would like some follow-up answers to, and I would encourage you to go back to your counselor and share exactly what you just asked me.
But does that information exist? Like, does anybody keep sort of like the 911 on it? Like when you look at applicants from any given college year, do you say, oh, we know that so many of these kids had a 504 and IEP for ADHD, and this is what their test scores look like and where they wind up, or I think it would be good information to have, you know, as part of the
I would do that for Chappaqua. I'd love to track, like I've talked to you all about that, doing a 5-year out tracking, like how did our kids do?
Right.
I remember years ago, I don't know if John remembers, maybe Karen remembers, there were a group of parents who were Greeley special ed parents who were somewhat involved because the counseling department didn't have a dedicated counselor whose bailiwick was the issues of these kids and placing them in schools and focusing on schools that were going to be SE friendly and what our outcomes were. And I don't think the school responded to that per se. There never did become one particular counselor in the group who made that their special area. But there are a lot of professionals available outside the school, a lot in this area. And I certainly, my experience with a child who has, you know, high functioning autism and ADD, they absolutely recommended an appropriate array of schools, and some of which, you know, as I said, he refused to go up and even look at because that
It would just be great for
he wasn't going to be there.
caliber to have.
Absolutely, but, and you can make sure that your student is comfortable working with the counselor that they've been assigned to, but they're all very knowledgeable about these areas. But if you're really not comfortable, I would say to go outside the
I
school.
have the outside person, but
Okay.
it would just be interesting.
No, but I'm more concerned with your comfort level.
Right.
And your twins' comfort level, because that's a lot to take on in 1 year. So get what you need for yourself.
I mean, no, I did, I have, but it would just be interesting, you know, interesting if there was a little bit more support catered to a child's school district, especially since as our guidance counselor will leave, and we're on our second guidance counselor will be here, who doesn't really know anything about my kids other
So I
than
just
their
want to,
birthday.
just in terms, and I do want to keep it more focused, and I know that there have been counselor turnover or
Right,
pieces
I know,
like
but
that,
so
but
that's
I
why I'm
think the
saying
big
it would be
picture.
interesting, so
But
it
then
wouldn't
you can't-
matter
you can't
who
control
your
those
counselor
things.
is,
Those things
that
happen.
existed.
That could
Council
happen
turnover.
anywhere.
I think
you know,
as a
council's
parent-
leave or-
That would be interesting, and it would be something to look at, and just.
Right, you can't, Rebecca can't say to her staff, oh, you're leaving us, so you can't leave, you're in indentured service. That can't happen,
I'm
or,
not talking about that. I'm
Right.
talking about having data that's available to guidance. So if your counselor leaves, or, you know, your kid, that they can have certain tracking about certain places maybe for a child with the, you know, the room
Sure.
and all these things, right?
Um,
Anyway, I'm not here to argue, it just was a
No,
thought
no, no.
of, you know, a service that could be more helpful, I think, as juniors go through the process.
Anybody else?
I'm a question girl. I noticed many of you, and this has been what I've been finding out in talking to parents, you enroll in one place and then you end up switching. And I've been noticing this in talking to a lot of other people. Do you find that to be common? It seems like you go and you think, well, and for whatever reason it's not working and you go somewhere else, or, you know, this, I'm talking to a lot of parents. Like they weren't ready to go away, they needed to come back, or, you know, just to prepare
I
parents
was
if this happens.
surprised at the smoothness of Henry's college trajectory. I had made it abundantly clear that if this wasn't the right place for him, it was totally fine to transfer. He wound up saying, but my other child who has none of his issues, of course, she transferred. So it's, you know, they're all different. I think it's just important to let them know that transferring is not an act of failure. It's you're lucky, you're blessed that it's an option. I transferred in the middle of college and it was less common back then, but just let them know that, you know, it's okay if you wind up at the wrong place. You can pick up your bags and find the right place.
Yeah,
And there is
I-
a right place.
It's not just for learning difference
Yeah.
students. I mean, kids routinely transfer. It's very normal, first of all. Second of all, we're lucky that we're in the American system. One thing about the UK system is you enter into a course of study, okay? So let's say you want to study mathematics, and you decide after freshman year, I don't like mathematics, I want to do something else. You have to reapply. You have to start all over again and pay tuition for 3 years to another school. Transfer is perfectly fine. You might think, I want the big rah-rah school. You get to the big rah-rah school and say, this place is a little bit too big for me. I don't like this. Or you're in an Ivy League school and say, this doesn't define me. I want something else. It's perfectly fine.
Yeah,
There's no stigma.
I can speak for my daughter who's switched. I don't know if you heard, but
I did, that's why.
it's perfectly fine. Like you said, just everyone has their own path, and it takes however long it takes. I'm just happy that she's in school, and right now she's happy. And that was our goal. She was not happy where she was, and we weren't going to force her to stay there. And even if she had to take this semester off to regroup, or go to community college or wherever, get a job, and she really wanted to go, so we worked our tails off over the break, and she got in, and it worked out. So yeah, everybody's different. My oldest daughter's been in the same school, no transfer. Every child is different. Everyone has their own path.
It takes a lot of guts to do that, to say this doesn't feel right for me and I need to transfer and try something different. Because you're walking in brand new to a whole new environment where everybody is kind of in their own world and you're kind of joining the world, you're joining the party late in the game. It's a hard thing to do. So if a kid, someone who's not learning difference is doing this, it's one thing. You pile on the learning difference or social issues. That's a lot more to bring to the table. So those kids get a major pat on the back.
I wanted to mention something that I heard the other day. If you want to go down a rabbit hole, Google a college you're interested for your kid, like Common Data Set, Vassar. And I spent hours doing this, but it told me that my kid is never going to get into Georgetown because they'll never take anybody below 3.2. And it's just interesting to see the raw data that ends up in these guidebooks 2 or 3 years after the fact. So if you kind of have a few colleges that you have your kid's heart set on, or you're just curious, just do Common Data Set X college. And Anne-Marie, I'm going to put you on the spot. Will you tell me your story?
Which one?
Your daughter, how it ended up with her.
My daughter she wanted to go to a certain college. I won't name it. I just wanted to go. She had to go to college. So I know what she wanted to go to. She saw it, she wanted to go there, that's where she wanted to go. And I said, well, let's go try for a state university, too. Like it's cheaper. That's got a good program, honest program. I'm part of that, too. She said, okay, I'll do it, but I'm going here. So anyway, it turns out she got into the school she wanted. She loved it, she did well, excellent, excellent. But she wanted to go to med school. And because she was a middle fish at the school she went to, they wouldn't even write her a letter to apply to a med school. But if she had gone to Binghamton, she would have been the big fish at Binghamton, and she would be in medical school. That's how I feel. I can't know that, but it's just, that's what I feel. Because it depends on the school that your child wants to go to, which she wanted to go there, she did well. It turned out great, but if she had gone there, her path might have been different. But you never know.
But you said that it turned out better for her because she ended up being a PA, right?
Yes, so she knew she couldn't go to med school. She came home, thought about it, thought of her options. She applied to a PA school, and now she's a physician's assistant, and she's working in New York City, and she's doing great. So things change, things go, and you get disappointments, but you move on, and hindsight's 20/20, but it all turns out
It all works out. The message is
it
it all
really does. I know you're nervous, but don't be. It turns out well. Your options are yours.
I'm crazy handling. I know you put it up there, but we didn't talk about it. I think it was from you, Alan. This is something my son has started using, the technology that's out there to help you. The woman who's coaching my son now is working using apps. I was thinking of the ADHD parent. They have like apps and things that they're using on the campus that help them to manage the work that they're doing. And also, I know at our college they use the program Kurzweil. I had to look up how to spell it. Kurzweil, which is a reading program that has textbooks online, and it has it's specifically designed to help students who may have difficulty getting information from the textbook. It highlights things. It's really wonderful. The professor. Here.
So can you post, I made a Facebook page for the Facebook Queen. It says college support for New York/Connecticut. And we're just all starting to share a little bit there, but can you post the apps there?
I can, and also I actually just purchased it, the Live Scribe, because I wanted to look at it, which is, our university uses, and it's a pen that they write notes with, but also records the lecture.
Yep.
And my understanding, we haven't used it yet, is that when you touch it to your notes, it can go back to that.
It goes to that piece, exactly.
Piece in the lecture.
That's a great thing, even in the high school, if your child needs something like that, it's a great piece of technology.
Right, and so, I mean, there's a lot of technology that you can get that will help your student. This is what I'm finding out, because the apps are helping my son tremendously to manage time and assignments and alerts and everything that, research paper due tomorrow,
Are all classes going to be online eventually, like in 10 years?
No, schools will not let that happen. There's too much there's so much physical plant in a university. I mean, the universities first of all, they're also landlords, so they have dormitories. Okay, they also have physical plant. They have hospitals. They're not going to go all online, but I think what you're going to see is distribution of education being done both virtually and in a classroom setting. And some schools are starting to do that. I get emails all the time from colleges saying, we have MOOC courses, the massive online programs. It's going to evolve more and more and more. That's the bottom line. So the one reality is that schools are not going to increase their bandwidth. So you're not going to see all of a sudden MIT having a 30% acceptance rate. The only school that's going to have a little bit of increase in bandwidth is Yale. They added another college. Villanova will probably have a little bit more because they're offering dorms to seniors, but the percents are going to kind of stay. What I think we're also going to see is more and more students looking outside the U.S. to study because the cost is a lot cheaper and it's a 3-year program. So that's what I think is going to be really interesting. And that's what I'm starting to focus more and more of my practice on.
Okay, I think it's 8:30, 8:39.
Thank you.
Thank you all.